Hello and welcome to this great investors edition of Wealth Track. I'm Consuelo Mack. This week we are visiting with an investment great who recently left us. Peter Bernstein died in June at the age of 90, publishing the last of his biweekly economics and portfolio strategy newsletters just 5 days before his death, a publication read by global investors who own or manage assets worth several $1 trillion. Peter was a rare combination of old-fashioned gentleman and razor-sharp intellect. He was an economist, historian, and strategist, a teacher, editor, and former investment advisor. He was a recognized expert on risk and author of 10 books, most of them written in the last 20 years of his life, including Against the Gods, The Remarkable Story of Risk. We were blessed to have Peter for Wealth Track television exclusives in 2005 and 2007, where he shared some of his timeless wisdom. To start the conversation, I asked Peter about one of his favorite theories about understanding risk. It's called Pascal's wager.
Pascal was a French mathematician in the 17th century, a compulsive gambler, and he was at the gambling tables one night, and a nobleman came up and asked him something about what are the chances something would happen, as a result of which he invented probability. The idea that we can calculate probabilities began with Pascal, 1654. Very religious man, a nut. The other half of his life, he was he led a life of sin, and then he would fluctuate back and forth. Finally retired to a monastery. And he asked himself a question. He said, God is or God is not. Is there a God or is there not a God? And this, he said, you can't reason this because there's no way you can figure it that way. So how do I deal with this question? It's an important question.
Very.
And then he said, well, I can deal with it. I can decide how I lead my life. And that has something to do with whether if I believe in God and lead a virtuous life, and then I die, and there is no God, well, I may have given up some goodies, but I had a pretty good life. But if I lead a bad life of sin and lust, and then I die, and there is a God, I'm in big trouble. And kind of the moral of this story is that there are many cases where we make choices and decisions where the consequences matter more than the probabilities. I may be able to run fast enough to cross the street before I get hit, but if I'm wrong, I'm mush on the roadway. So once I got it, I learned about this. I use it now in all kinds of decision making where it really matters. That very often you have to forget the probabilities because the consequences are so serious.
Talk about its importance in investing, that the consequences matter more. Yeah. Some consequences matter more than the probabilities.
Let me talk about it from a positive side. It doesn't necessarily mean that you always make the cautious decision, maybe the other one. Many years ago, I haven't managed money for a long time, but when I was managing it, a woman came to us who had been very badly injured. She was in an airplane crash and badly injured and had a settlement from the airline. I think it was $100,000, something like that. All she had in the world. And how do you take care of this? She was young, in her 20s. So we decided we would put half that money in bonds, but the other half we were going to shoot the moon because she didn't have very much anyway. If we lost it, she was in trouble anyhow. But if we could make a killing on that, it would make a tremendous difference. So this was a case where if we were wrong, we felt the damage would be minor, and that being right was what could really pay off.
My next interview with Peter Bernstein took place in 2007. One of your quotes is, "We really do not know what the future holds. Risk in our world is nothing more than uncertainty about the decision that other human beings are going to make and how we can best respond to those decisions." What are some of the decisions that human beings are making now that either that are changing the markets, that represent opportunity or risk?
This is an important idea. You think oh, the markets are going to give us 11% over the long run or whatever. The markets are going to give us whatever somebody else will pay for what we own. And you really don't know what that's going to be. It's a very, very important distinction.
When you look at, again, how these capital ideas are evolving, what are some of the key evolutions that we should know about that will help us become better investors?
Well, I think it sounds simple and repetitious, but that risk is the centerpiece. That we can't manage returns. We're going to get what we're going to get, but we can manage our risk. And I think that people think in terms of where do I want to be and what should I own and what do I want to buy, and that's where they begin. But they should begin by thinking about how much can I stand the heat in the oven, and really think about that hard. I mean, Harry Markowitz, who kind of was the man who started this whole business in 1952, he was sent to read a book about how to value stocks. He didn't know anything at all. And it said you should buy the single best stock that you could find. It was a very famous book. And he said, but I have to think about risk as well as return. I mean, a very simple idea.
Right.
But from that, this whole body of thought developed. And from that, the people whom I respect and whom I covered in the book begin from there and constantly test themselves. Yale, to cite it again, has a meeting every year in which they think of everything goes wrong, how serious is this going to be for us, what effect will it have on the university, how much will the endowment suffer, will this affect Yale's position in the world? They go through this whole thing by kind of getting a worst case look. And how long would it be before we come back to where we were? And they do this rigorously every year, and then the whole decision for the next year is based on what that shows.
And so that's something that individuals should be doing
too, yes.
every year as well.
If everything goes down the tube, where am I? Mm-hmm. And I mean, for a lot of people, they may be okay because their portfolio, the security portfolio is a relatively small part of their assets. And if they lost it, it would be a shame, but it wouldn't be as bad as losing their job or losing their home. Mm-hmm. So they maybe should be taking more risks than they think they should be because they can afford to do it. Once you've got it made, then it's silly to take more risk. Because
that's interesting.
Lose what you've got.
I see. That's interesting.
Yes.
Because a lot of people, if you assume if you're comfortable and you have the assets that you need to live on, then you can afford to take more risk to get higher returns.
But you don't have to.
You don't have to.
And
right?
risk means that you might lose. Mm-hmm. Whereas if it doesn't matter much anyway, there's a year's income or something in that pot, shoot the moon.